Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 13. It's the official time to put the foot on the gas, right? Because we've got about a month left, a little less. And now is the time where a lot of people, you've held it together for 12 weeks. Things start getting a little bit tougher. You got all your classes saying, hey, things are due. So I know this is a tough time. I'm one of the teachers giving you stuff to do, but you can do it. Right? Make sure you got your schedule adequately adjusted for the last 3-4 weeks of the semester so you can be getting the things done that you need to. And we're going to start off with Serapis, one of my favorite gods, and I will tell you why. This was actually from the Sunken Egypt exhibit at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and I was using it in my mythology class, but it fits for us too, because this city, and I'm not going to butcher its name because I haven't spent enough time learning to pronounce it correctly, was at the Nile Delta. So you have obviously the Egyptian control, but what's across the Mediterranean, right? Greece. So this is where they're trading, and they're saying, hey, we got Zeus, you got Osiris. Ah, what the hell? Let's make a new god that combines them. Boom. Now you have Serapis, right, who's got his own temple there, right, one of his sculptures. And what I like about it, why I brought it into here, is because ideas are like that. Just as in mythology, two cultures meet, they share their stories, and then they're like, oh, okay, great. Now we've got a new one. Ideas are doing the same thing. Jane has an idea, Joe has an idea, Jane Joe. Right? And here's this idea that's more than the individual parts, and it holds pieces of each. And so here's a concrete, or maybe marble would be better, right? Example of two different cultures, right, sharing their ideas, coming up with something new. And hopefully in your papers, you will have your idea. Here's what I thought about the topic. Then you're going to find some research about what other people say, and what you're going to create is something bigger than both what they have and what you've thought, because you're putting those ideas together, right, and then presenting them to somebody else, me, your fellow classmates, right? And the journey, right, of thought, of knowledge continues, right? So week 13, let's get into what you're going to be doing this week. Now, if you read chapter 12 at the beginning of the semester, I only want you to read the summary because you've already read it, but I do think it's worthwhile to, now that you've read the entire book, think back 12 weeks ago, right, whenever, and so many people posted, right, about how interesting that was, and it made sense. There's different values, valuable things we can get from liberals, conservatives, right? Now you've seen his whole argument. Read the summary just to refresh what's going on. If things came up and you did not read the chapter 12 at the beginning of the semester, definitely read the whole thing. Now, as much as I like Jonathan Haidt, and I do, I think he makes really good arguments. I like his research. So what? If I am going to, right, go out into the world and take some of his ideas, mix them with mine, and present them and say, hey, here's what I think, and this is what it's based on, I would be wise to double check. So what I want you to do is just that, right? Take an idea that you liked or that you questioned in here, and then double check it. Now, how are you going to double check it? Oops. All right. So in this book, you're going to see at the end, there's two different sections. There's references, right? And this is where you can go and find out, here's the exact source, and then you'll know how to search for it, right? And then there's also notes, right? And so when you're reading a chapter and all of a sudden you see a little mark, right, number 36 on page 300, well, you can go to that chapter, C36. So both the notes and the references will give you where to look. But I want you to pick something anywhere in the book that you either really like, and then it's like double check, right? Because, oh, if you already like it, I've got confirmation bias and I might just swallow the whole thing. Or if there's something that you're like, you know what, this one part I always questioned, great. Go check it and see maybe your background knowledge has led you astray. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, great. Now I got to change that if I want to be intellectually honest. But you might also find that, you know what? My feeling there, now that I've done some research on it, makes sense because while either you will see, nope, that was totally, misconstrued, don't like it. Or you might go, oh, he's a psychologist. He's looking at it this way. And here's what he said. I'm coming from this background. And so both of these views, right, are valid, but they're coming from a different source or a different angle, right? Snitches get stitches. Well, maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. And it's all going to depend on what's more important, right? Loyalty to the individual or loyalty to society, right? And so you can make a good argument for both snitches should not get stitches and snitches should get stitches, right? But it's going to be, where's your angle? What are you coming from? What do you view of society, authority, etc.? Where's your responsibility end? Right? Does it end with your friends and your family? Then who cares? Does it end with that bigger community? Then it matters. So that's the post that I want you to do. So read the summary, do the post. Here's where you post it. Now, for Thursday, so this is all the stuff for Thursday, because all along the next few weeks, there's not going to be a lot of reading for you to do because I want you working on your paper. And I also know how tough it can be sometimes without assignments, and you're going to wait till the last minute and try to do a 2,000-word paper, which will be a nightmare, right? So along the way, for the next couple weeks, I am going to have benchmarks that will keep you moving on your paper. And understand that all of these, or almost all of these, are going to have working in front of it. Working introduction, working body, because I would not expect on April 16th, you are going to write an introduction, and then May 3rd, it's going to be the same exact introduction. You will have learned so much more. You will have written down, got your thoughts organized. You'll probably go back and change it. But it is very helpful to have an introduction that you can play around with, right, along the way, just as having body parts, right, is going to be important, so you're not trying to do it all in the last minute. So with that in mind, I have created groups again. And this time I made the groups larger because I know, right, life happens, some people don't post. But the groups are big enough that every group should have at least 6 or 7 people posting. And in these posts, I want you to read and respond to everybody, right? Because this is where we're giving in that feedback and sharing our writing. So I jumped ahead. For Thursday, I want you to have a rough outline of your paper. And I do mean rough, right? Because you've done some thinking about it, but you're rough. But I want it sentence level, right? Which means, and I have a link to this, so you can go and look at, here is an example of a sentence level outline, right? And you can follow, very basic, you're using full sentences, right? If there's an A, there should be a B. If there's a 1, there should be a 2. And the reason that I want you to have full sentences is because a phrase typically does not convey enough information, right? So if your topic was drugs, well, what about it? Your drugs, my drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, illegal drugs, right? Or drugs are bad and good. Well, which drugs? I mean, I don't know about you, but I go to a pharmacy, right, when I have a cold. Or so just saying drugs are bad, or well, anything that short isn't going to, number one, it isn't going to force you to start spelling out your ideas. And number two, if I look at an outline that's not in complete sentences, I really don't know where you're going with it. So I want you to do a sentence outline, and it's a working sentence outline, right? So I would hope that you have 3 or 4 parts to it. Start with the thesis, your working thesis, so I know where you're going. And then I'll be able to say, hey, I think you're right on track. This is great. Or I might say, hey, consider this. So I want you to have a working outline. Hey, Steve, I think these are the things I'm going to cover. And again, it's going to change over time, but I'm requiring you to get that, hey, here's what I think is going to happen. So at least you're starting to get a framework in your head. So this is where I want you to turn in the outline. That's the example that I just showed you. So for Thursday, I want you to double check Jonathan Haidt, something from there, and I want you to come up with a rough outline. I'm not going to hold you to it, but I want to know what you are thinking, right? Then for Monday, I want you to write a working introduction. This is the one that's in groups. So once you log in, it should only let you go into a particular group. And in here, I want you to use the earlier handout, right, in video to make sure you're using a technique from our list. Post your introduction, end it with your thesis. When you are reading everybody else's, right, I want you to respond to, look, what's it supposed to do? Does it grab your attention, right? And if it doesn't grab your attention, say, hey, this is not grabbing my attention, right? And a lot of times it's because the person's too general, right? There are good things and bad things about X. Well, no kidding, we all know that, right? So maybe you give a suggestion that, you know, if you were more specific, or could you give me an example? Or, but let us know. If you think it grabs your attention, say, yes, you got my attention. If it doesn't, say, you know, nope, you may want to go and look at other strategies. Does it set up the thesis? If the thesis is saying something like, pharmaceutical companies are more interested in, or pharmaceutical companies use research costs as an excuse to jack up prices, right? Say that's something that you're doing, right? And then your introduction has nothing about research, nothing about drugs, nothing about, you know, anything related to that, or just barely. That's not setting up the thesis. Whereas just yesterday I heard insulin, when it first came out, was $1 a vial, right? And now in some places it's $1,500, right? And that's kind of, that would be a surprising example, right, of price increase, right? That would then make sense of, oh, now this person's going to show me in the paper, right, how this is all working, right? And then that you have a clear thesis at the end. If you get to the end of the paragraph and you're like, I'm not sure what this paper is going to cover, it doesn't have a strong thesis at the end, let them know. You are not held to this one, but you are responsible for writing it, because that will get you thinking. And sometimes what will happen is you write an introduction and you'll be like, okay, I know this isn't fully grabbing, but it's doing its job. Then as you write the paper, you find something in those next 1,800 words. It's like, wow, this will grab people's attention. And you move it up. But I want you to have one. It gives you the practice of writing. It also makes sure that worst case scenario, you do have one for that rough draft, right? So here's a link to the handout on the types of introductions and conclusions, right? Which will look like this. And then if you want to watch the video, it's on week 6. So just scroll down, go to announcements, go to the bottom, hit show all announcements, and then you can scroll down to week 6 and you'll watch my video on it. So for Monday, introduction, and then I want you to also take one of your sources, right? Because you've started your research. Pick one that's the most interesting and write a page on it. So this one. All right, so I'm looking for roughly a page. And again, all of this is to keep you moving, keep you writing. And what I want you to do is take one of your sources, right? Something that you found that's interesting. You might use this and end up, this stays in your paper for the whole next 3 weeks. It might disappear. Either way, it's going to be a valuable experience, because I want you to set up the source, right? So here's my source, but who is this person? What is this research? You know, give us the background of it. Set up the source. Say what the source says, either in a paraphrase, right? Definitely if you're doing APA, you want to paraphrase as much as possible. But MLA, think about, if this is written so special that there's no way I could be more beautiful than it, sure, put it in quotes. But otherwise, paraphrasing is very nice. And then once you've set it up, here's this thing. This is what it said. Now, tell us why it's important for your thesis. So for example, with the pharmaceutical one, right, maybe I was actually in the body, I gave that example. I'm citing NPR because that was where the interview was, or MPR. Right, I go back, I have to look up what show it was. right? I cite it and then I say this is important because it shows how, right, pharmaceutical companies, use patents to protect it, blah blah blah. But I'll explain why that's important. Right? So for Monday, I want you to have an introduction and a page done, basically, of your paper, right? And not done. I mean, this is rough draft stuff. So that means complete sentences, good grammar, might as well put it in good MLA style or APA style as far as you're citing it in that. So you're getting that practice. But I'm not gonna hold it to you. You must use this, right? I'm not gonna get real worried if you've got an MLA error in here or a grammar error, but you don't want to just make it so sloppy that you aren't doing at least one level of editing before you show it to people, right? Saying, yep, okay, this is decent. All right, that is the homework for the week. There will, of course, be an update. Update on Friday. Now, Monday, April the 22nd is the last day to withdraw, and if you are, below 55-50 and know that you can't put in extra time, right, then dropping might be the best thing to do this semester, right? I am working with a couple people who have some stuff to make up, and if you're one of those people, right, I'll be happy to work with you too. Just know that we are down to a small window, and there's only so much that can be done, right? And most of you are nice and safe. You got a good passing grade. Now it's about keeping it up and then deciding sort of where you want to end, right? Do you want to end right where you're at? Do you want to bump it up a little bit? And all of that is possible. So let me know if you've got questions, and I hope you have a good week. I'll just say this. Make sure you have a real schedule, right? Real meaning it actually is something you can do. If you know you're not going to write at 7 in the morning, I wouldn't say, oh, hey, I'm going to write at 7 in the morning. But make sure you have a schedule for the next couple weeks because you got a big paper to write, your life is busy, and if you don't carve out those times, nobody else is going to do it for you. Right? Have a good one. I will be seeing you around.